Hello everyone, my name is Carrie Johnson and I am the Manager of Government and External Relations for SDN Communications. And it is my pleasure to introduce Celia Paulsen from NIST, and Matt Barrett will be speaking after her. And Celia is going to take a deep dive into explaining what is risk management. Much of what the NIST framework really centers around is getting us from this check-the-box compliance mindset into thinking critically about our unique risk facing all of our organizations. So Celia is going to help us get a better sense of what is risk management, what does it mean for our organizations, and how can we create a culture of cybersecurity that's thinking critically about the unique threats we face.
So my name is Celia Paulsen, and judging by the room, I think I am the youngest one in. But I have had about 20 years of experience in this. I started when I was 8 years old. My brother helped me write a computer program that would help me with my math. Because to this day, I still stink at math. And it was just addition, subtraction, things like that. And then the next day, he hacked it so that it would always tell me I was wrong. Thank you, brother. So that is how I got into this. Why is NIST here? So this is the NIST mission, to promote U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness by advancing measurement, science standards, and technology in ways that enhance economic security and improve our quality of life. And that is quite a mouthful, but it's government speak. So the important things in that is measurement science and economic security. So years and years and years ago, somebody much smarter than me looked at that and said, you know, I think that NIST would be really good for helping us with these time-sharing computer things. And ever since then, we've had somebody at NIST doing computer security research. And we recently set up an applied cybersecurity research, applied cybersecurity division, which is even more stuff. We do a lot of stuff. So, show of hands, who here has heard of NIST before I just explained it to you? Awesome. How many of you know that NIST does stuff other than computer security? Good. Okay. A lot of times when I give presentations, people have never heard about NIST. So I point to random things that we probably standardized at some point. And like carpet, I think we standardized the number of fibers in carpet and how to measure how many fibers are in carpet. I'm glad I don't have that job. So that's NIST. How many of you know what this is? Good. So this is the NIST Risk Management Framework. And for those of you who do know it, I am very sorry. I'm only going to be talking about the first one up there, the categorized information system, and how to get to the next one. I'm not going through the whole thing. I'm going very basic, and risk management in general. I could give you the government definition, but we're going to skip that. So risk management is balancing protection loss with protection costs. It sounds kind of awkward, but I'll tell you, you do it every day. Everybody does it every day. I do it every day. And one thing that I like about this is it's always a balance. You can't take one off of the equation. You can't get rid of losses. There's always going to be a potential loss. And you can't get rid of the costs. You just can't. Because one way or another, there's going to be costs. And I don't mean money. Money is a part of this, it's a big part of this, but it's not the whole part. Costs could be time, could be energy, could be anything. So, anybody know what this is? This is a farm. Frame, assess, respond, and monitor. I bet you've never seen a farm that looks quite like that. So, here's an example of how we use risk management every day. When you signed up to come here and you woke up this morning and you said, hey, I've got this workshop to go to, you looked at what time it was and said, how am I going to get there in time? So your frame is that you really want to be here. That's really important to you. I'm glad you're here. your assessment is like, all right, so what's traffic going to look like? Am I going to take an airplane, and what's that going to be like? Is it going to get me there on time? And if, with the security lines, how early am I really going to have to leave? And it could be fairly early for some people. Then maybe you check the traffic in the morning and you say, what's the traffic looking like today? I might have to leave a little bit earlier than I planned. Then respond, that's easy, you left the house. Good job, you succeeded. And then monitor. Maybe, if you're like me, who gets lost every single time I get in the car, I have my GPS that's always running, and it happens to have the traffic on there. So if my nice little phone tells me to take a left turn, and I'm not used to taking a left turn, guess what? I take the left turn, because it's probably routing me around some kind of traffic. So that helps me monitor the situation. And then it's back to assessing. It's always back to assessing. It's like, how did I get here on time? Maybe I'm late. If I'm late, maybe tomorrow I'm going to have to leave a little bit earlier. It's always this roundabout thing, and you do it every day. It's simple. So now I'm going to make it a little bit more complex. How many in here have ever done a business process analysis? Oh, not very many people. So how many in here are the owners of a business? All right, how many people are somewhere in the middle of a gigantic place and you don't know what's happening with your neighbors? That's good. So usually people I talk to, it's one or the other. Either you're the owner and you feel like you know everything that happens in your business, or you feel a bit lost and you don't know what's happening. So here we have a good mix. That's good. So business process analysis is really simple. It's a basic management thing where somebody comes into your organization, or you do it, and they follow people around. It's really not very fun. And they'll look and say, what are you doing? And then they write it all up. And then they write a big report and send it to somebody. What they're actually doing is trying to figure out ways that they can better improve the processes in the business. One example was with Lockheed Martin. They had somebody track how they built an airplane. And they noticed that this guy would have to walk back to a workstation, and then go back to the airplane and plug something in, go back to his workstation, go back to the airplane and plug something in. They said, that's really kind of a waste of time. So what did they do? They put wheels on the workstation. So that way he could just carry the nice table around with him to the airplane. Saved a whole lot of time, saved a whole lot of money. We're going to do the same thing as that, but talking about cybersecurity. So key things about cybersecurity that people don't think about is it's not about cybersecurity. How about that for a twister? The key things that you need to know about cybersecurity is how your business operates, because that's what it fundamentally comes down to. Your business is your business. Your business is not, cybersecurity unless it is cybersecurity. Do you know what resources your business uses? I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about people, technologies, data, and especially information. That's the key. When you're doing a business process analysis, following the information is actually one of the best ways to do it, because everybody touches information, and businesses typically run on information. And it could be information such as proprietary information. It could be, a baker who has recipes in his head, that kind of information. But it's always information somewhere in the business that makes businesses run. So follow the information. And then when you get to the security part of it, do you know who has access to the information? And what systems have access to the information? What people have access to the systems that access your information? And then finally, that helps you get to know what to protect. So this is a worksheet. You wanted homework, didn't you? The professor didn't, I'm sure.
It's finals week, there's no more homework.
Nice. So, first off, NIST gives this presentation, we give a class around the country to a bunch of small businesses, and we walk them through. I'm giving you the very, very brief synopsis of that class. So you're going to have homework. So the first step in a risk management process, knowing what you have, it really helps if you just write it down. Write down every single piece of information. I'm not talking about systems. I'm not talking about the inventory that your poor warehouse guy meticulously maintains. That'll come next. I'm talking about information. I want you to know exactly what information your business uses. And a lot of people, I will tell you, they don't know. Most businesses don't know what information they use, which is pretty telling. And the reason they don't know is they don't ask people. So you go to a normal business and you go to the secretary, say, what information do you use? Oh, well, I use Google, I use, all sorts of things. And business owner might never have realized that. Why is that important? Because you don't want your IT guy shutting off your secretary's access to Google if she needs that for her job. So this is why it's really important you know what information you have. You just list it out, types of information. There's an example here that says employee personally identifiable information. So you can name social security numbers. Pretty much every business has that kind of information. And then on the left here, we've written down what could happen to that information. And we're talking about information, not systems right now. So what would happen if your employees' information was revealed to the world? What if, I don't know how it happened, but somehow the world now has your employees' social security numbers, etc. How does that affect your business? Then what about verifying that information? What if something happened to change, say, your budget spreadsheet or your tax information? What would happen if something changed to any of the information you have? What would it take to verify that information? And then loss of access. What if you no longer had any of your employees' cell phone numbers? That could be a pain in the butt. So what would it take to get that back? And then you can add in a whole bunch of other things such as legal fines, repair costs. There's a whole bunch of lists that you could make up and say, this is going to cost me X, Y, Z. That's your first step to a risk assessment, is finding out what your information is worth. And then we make the inventory. This is where we correlate your information to people, technologies, whatever, wherever it sits. We do this second. Most businesses switch that. Most people have the inventory of information systems, but they don't know what information sits on it. So that's why we switch it. You're going to find out what information you have and then find out where it sits. And this is actually really useful, we've found, because people say, well, that information shouldn't be there. Why is that information there? That's odd. This is really building it from the bottom up. What information do you have, and then where does it sit? I have, anybody here Doctor Who fan? Huh. Did you get my reference? John Smith's cell phone. John Smith was the name that Doctor Who would use when he was hiding. And it's the blue box, which is the TARDIS. Don't say that. That's just my nice little, I do my best. So then you have the location. Location could be, physical, or it could be logical, it could be anything. This is really where you write down everything and anything about the information systems, including people, that touch your information. So I have an impact score here at the end, which is 7, which if you look back here at the bottom, there's a nice little 7. And that's a very arbitrary number. So it can be taken in a number of ways. It could be the actual costs, like dollar amounts. It could be high, medium, low. It could be whatever you want. I chose 7. I don't know if it's on a scale of 1 to 10 or a scale of 1 to 100. I don't really know. That's something that you would have to determine in your business, is find out how you want to rate these and make it consistent throughout. But what you need is just to have that, score at the end. And then, if you look here on the description of the information system, Johnson's cell phone, it has a bunch of types of information listed: employee, PII, calendar, email. I decided to take the highest one of those, the highest risk, which was employee PII, which had a risk score of 7. So I plugged it in. I chose the highest. Some organizations will add them up, add the risk scores up and do it that way. That works too. As long as you assign an impact score. And the reason for this is so that we can prioritize what we spend our money on. So now, risk assessment. This is the fun stuff. A threat acts on a vulnerability and creates risk with determinable likelihood and negative impact or consequence, which is another mouthful. Simply put, a threat is something, that's going to hurt you. A vulnerability is what's going to stop them from hurting you. And the risk is, what are the chances of that actually happening? So taking it out of the IT sphere, there's an example up there, but say you have a nice jewelry set in your house. So threat would be somebody who knows that you have a nice jewelry set in your house and very possibly will want to break in and steal that nice jewelry set. Vulnerability could be that lock on your front door doesn't work anymore. That could be a vulnerability. Or it could be something as simple as something you don't have, like you don't have an alarm system. That could be a vulnerability. Vulnerabilities are actually a lot harder to measure than threats are. Well, I'll get into that in a bit. Risk, how likely is it going to occur? Well, how many other people in your neighborhood have been robbed? And that could tell you how likely it's going to occur. And what are the consequences if it does? Well, let's go back 2 slides. Number 7, that's your consequence. And hopefully it translates to some kind of dollar amount for you. If not, that's okay. But that's your consequence, is number 7. So threats can be anything. I know we're talking about cybersecurity here, but I'm going to step back from that a little bit because a threat can be anything. When I was involved in this, I was a social engineer and I was a script kiddie, but 90% of the times, if I wanted to break into a place, I would break a lock. Now that's not cybersecurity, is it? Yes, it is. It is. Breaking a lock is quite involved in this. So a threat can be environmental. It could be that you have a shoddy sprinkler system in your data center and it's going to go off and destroy your servers. That sucks. It could be business resources. You just fired your chief IT guy. That sucks too. Or it could be hackers and criminals or script kiddies or somebody who just wants to do bad things. The professor listed a lot of other threats. Vulnerabilities, weakness, and security protections. How can you measure something that you don't know? That's the tricky thing about vulnerabilities. It's something that you don't have. It's a negative space, which is very difficult to measure, which is often why we have compliance. Compliance is very useful for helping you figure out what you don't have. It's very useful for giving you some things that you want to check into. Like, for example, compliance checklist sort of thing will say you need to have a firewall. Great, I didn't even know what a firewall was. Let me look into that. That really helps you identify your vulnerabilities. And the likelihood, chance, the threat affecting your business. Look at industry statistics. There's a whole bunch of resources that will be talked about later that can help you look at likelihoods and threats. And then the impact, which again was number 7. And all of that leads to risk. See, you thought you knew what risk was and it got a lot more complicated, huh? I thought so. And we're not done yet. Look, more homework. So, number 3, identify threats. So you're going to just list out a bunch of threats. And it could be from, variety of resources that will be talked about later. You just want to list them out. We have them separated into CIA, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, which is very common. confidentiality, I listed threat, theft, accidental disclosure, blah, blah, blah. And then I started listing, what are the chances that that's going to happen? Well, guess what? A cell phone is really easy to steal. So I put that as a high. And then the chance that John Smith is going to leave his cell phone unlocked on a table for somebody to check, medium. And then down at the very bottom, overall likelihood, I looked at the highest. This one, you don't add it up, you don't do any of that, you look at the highest. What is the highest thing? And this is interesting because noticed up there, I have customer PII on John Smith's cell phone. So this is where having both information and the information systems comes into play. It's both now. So we're looking at John Smith's cell phone, but we're looking at the customer information that's on that cell phone. And I should say, you can get as detailed or as broad as you want in all of this. Detailed is better because it's more specific. But for larger organizations, a lot of detail can be very difficult and costly to obtain. So it's whatever works for your organization. More detail, better, but whatever you can do. So one of the last things that the professor said was have a security plan. This is where that comes into play. Now you're going to prioritize your response. So we at NIST, we hate checklists. It sounds kind of surprising for people who make a bunch of lists of security things, right? None of them are checklists. People use them as checklists. They're not checklists. 853, anybody? A couple. It's not a checklist. Stop using it as a checklist. All right? This is where you find out what you need to use. And with the framework, this is how you figure out what it is in those various categories and things, what you use. You don't have to use them all unless, somebody above you says to, but you don't. So priority 1, that means that the impact score that you gave, the number 7, and the likelihood score, which was high, both of those are high. That means you need to fix it right now. And under the framework, you're going to look at detect and protect solutions. That's where you need to focus your energy, and that's where you need to focus your money. And here's a surprise. So, Professor and others have talked about how telling the CEO, getting the CEO's involvement is really critical. This right here is how you do it. This is the thing that you show your CEO that says, this is why we need to invest. And this is how much we need to invest. Going through this process is what gets your CEO involved. And then you write it down. It means absolutely nothing if you don't write it down. And I think I hit exactly 30 minutes. So I'm going to turn it over to Matt. And he's going to talk more about the framework and how this applies to the framework.
All right, well, thank you very much. Celia's team goes all around the country teaching folks cybersecurity stuff from 0 to 60, in this case in 30 minutes. Usually, in order to get your arms around cybersecurity framework, you need a little bit of information on cybersecurity, so that's why we elected to start there. The cybersecurity framework, perhaps by now you know, but just for background, it originates from an executive order called Improving Critical Infrastructure Cybersecurity. That is Executive Order 13636. For people who just like to memorize random numbers like I do. An executive order, you may know, is a policy of the United States. It's not a law, it's a policy of the United States, and like all good policies, it has a why, a little bit of why, a lot of what and who and when. And so in that policy, NIST, or more accurately, the Department of Commerce, and it kind of trickled down to NIST, was requested to create a framework. And there were all sorts of properties that we needed to live up to. We needed to help create a framework that would help folks prioritize, a framework that would be cost effective, a framework that would mind privacy and civil liberties, a framework that would be supportive of incentives, et cetera. Well, all of those things from the executive order became design criteria for a team of folks that developed cybersecurity framework. And I'll say, at that time, I was not program manager of cybersecurity framework, and that gives me a little bit of liberty to brag on it, because I think the work of my colleague Kevin Stein and the brilliant team of folks that were helping him out with that is really effective, and hopefully you'll agree. Ultimately, we did develop the cybersecurity framework in the 365 days specified in that executive order, 364 days to be precise. And we created something, and part of the reason that I think that the framework is valuable is the process that Kevin and the team used, because we hit 5 different cities, 5 different universities, all the various industries over the course of that year, doing 5 different workshops, gathering as much input as we could from the stakeholder group. Really, NIST in the development process, we were more convener than anything else. Ultimately, we did have a role of adjudicating all those comments and sifting through them and trying to get some, to the things that were most valuable in the final version of framework. In doing so, and in creating something that is applicable for all 16 critical infrastructure sectors, those are the 16 out of Presidential Policy Directive 21, PPD 21. In doing so, and abstracting up from the various sectors, we actually created something that's applicable outside of critical infrastructure as well. We also created something that is effective whether you're standing up a cybersecurity program anew, in which case framework would be very, very helpful. It's also helpful as a point of reflection. If you've got a great and mature practice, that's not a reason to pass on cybersecurity framework. It still might be worth taking a look. It's a really quick read, by the way. It's like 18 pages, really, really simple. We did it that way on purpose. We kind of realized that NIST is known for our tomes on cybersecurity, and we wanted to write something that's a little bit more high level and a little bit more accessible. So it's 18 pages with executive summary. So if you haven't actually cracked that open, it's an easy breezy read. So it's a great thing to go and consume and reflect on your mature practice, and just make sure, kind of an objective read on that practice by virtue of holding it up to the framework and seeing whether you can truly say those things of your practice. So it's great for mature practices as well. The framework itself, once again, looked good on my screen. The framework itself, there's a great business process in there, a tried and true business process in there that's described in 7 steps. And it's basically your classical gap analysis where we're painting that gap analysis picture in framework terms. The terms that we're using are the 3, what I call components here on the screen. There is the core, the framework core. So when everybody thinks of the framework and they think of identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, those 5 words, that's the core. That's the vocabulary of framework. In fact, I have a lengthier explanation of that here in a little bit. Then there is a profile, which is the customization of the core for you, whether you is a sector, or a subsector, or an individual organization. It's a customization of framework. And then there is the implementation tiers. It's not unusual, once people get their arms around the basic language of framework, the 5 functions, and start using that. Perhaps folks were already using those words. We purposely picked common words, accessible words, words that had fairly standard definition. Your definition wasn't going to be hugely different than my definition. We purposely did that. So once people start using those words some, they typically start taking a hard look at implementation tiers. This is what some folks think of as a maturity model. We have been saying that there's an important distinction here for maturity models. But basically, it's a 1 to 4 scale. There's some words tied to that 1 to 4. Here we have partial, risk-informed, repeatable, adaptive. And despite lecturing many, many times on the topic, I do have to look over at the slides to read those off to you. So there are 3 properties that span that 1 to 4 scale. There is the health of your risk management process. There is the integrated risk management program as a property. This is, I like to think of this as the horizontal integration of cybersecurity across all the other things that your business does, right? So your business does perhaps contracts legal, has HR, has finance, has lines of business, how you actually interact with customers and make money, right? And so the integration of cybersecurity into those other things is what we're getting at when we say integrated risk management program. And then there's external participation as a property, once again spanning all the scale, the 1 to 4 scale. And that's more about the extent to which your practice is informed by information from outside of your organization and also shares that information back, helpful, environmentally friendly to the ecosystem, so to speak there. So I mentioned the maturity model, this notion that we're a little bit different, and the thing we wanted to highlight here is NIST recognized, and in fact it was loud and clear from our stakeholder group, that there's a cost associated with being a 4. What we were trying to acknowledge in this point is that it's okay to choose to be a 4 for one party organization, but then correspondingly to choose to be a 3 over here and a 2 over there. After all, where are you going to get the funds to be a 4 over there? Where it really, really, really is important. So we're trying to acknowledge that prioritization, and that's a prioritization people will go through anyway, whether NIST condone it or not, but we were trying to acknowledge that in the implementation tiers themselves. We don't recommend you hang out in that partial level forever and ever, but it is a part of the evolution of a business, and it helps put you on the map if that happens to be where you are right now. So here is a way that I like to visualize. I need to get it down to some Tinker Toy sort of stuff. So there's your risk management process, your integrated risk management program, and then your external data. Now, if you squint your eyes just a little bit, I'm going to transition now to a diagram from the framework document. Remember, we got this vertical risk management in green, and we got this horizontal integrated risk management program in blue, and all of a sudden you've got green and blue triangles on the slide. That's part of the thing that we were trying to express in that diagram. That's one of several things we were trying to express. For those of you who are familiar with NIST Special Publication 839, you'll note the similarity in between this and the pyramid showing levels 1 through 3 and that 839 pyramid. That's purposeful similarity. They were drawn parallel, but we actually flipped the triangle upside down to try to show that horizontal notion. The other property of this diagram that I think is important is you basically got what I would consider 2 Deming cycles, one sitting on top of the other here, right? It's a plan, do, check, act, or an OODA loop, if you like, feedback loop. They're sitting on top of one another. One showing how senior executive level folk intersect with business process level folk in a notional cybersecurity ecosystem, and another showing how the business process level folk intersect with the implementation operational level folks. And we're starting to see risk management concepts expressed here, including this notion of a framework profile, which we'll talk about later. One of the things that I think is also observable here is Celia mentioned the FARM, the frame, assess, respond, monitor methodology, also from Special Publication 839. That's a really great risk management publication if you ever want to go take a little bit deeper look at a classical NIST special publication. But you can actually see the FARM methodology represented here, that framing up the disposition, the risk disposition of the organization, passing it down, monitoring it, assessing how that is changing over time, and then ultimately acting on that information. That's the respond piece. The FARM methodology is alive and well in framework. Another thing, Celia showed that decisioning quad chart toward the end of her presentation, and I think we see that as a great tool around the business process level folks administering the risk disposition. How can we quickly get to a decision on how we're going to implement cybersecurity? That's where I see that artifact fitting into the ecosystem. Anybody here ever sit through a biology class? Hopefully you remember this one. This is how I always remember it. It's not, you know, I promise I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this with the legit way and not look at my screen. Kids play cards on Fridays, generally speaking. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. It's the 7-layer taxonomy for every plant and animal species on the face of the planet, I guess, suppose you could even say in the universe. That's how biologists keep all the plants and animals straight. Before there was such a 7-layer model, this is, by the way, my explanation of the really geeky word taxonomy, but I want to use it, so I wanted to explain why I'm using it. Before a taxonomy existed for plant and animal life, scientists could indeed identify that they were working on the same, bird. For instance, somebody in Okinawa, somebody in New Zealand. Is your bird blue? Yep, my bird's blue. Okay. How long is the beak? 5 millimeters? Yep, me too. Okay. And they could get to the answer. Took a longer time. There was a greater chance of miscommunication. There's other neat properties of taxonomies. For instance, when I say canine and when I say feline, I bet all of you in your mind's eye kind of sort of understand some similarities between the two and also some differences. And so that's another property of a taxonomy, right? There's these properties as we're moving down a hierarchy, warm-blooded, cold-blooded, amphibian, reptile, mammal, etc. These properties as we're moving down this hierarchy. Well, cybersecurity framework is the same way. It's a 3-layer model, and it's around cybersecurity outcomes. And here's a glance at the top 2 layers of that model. Basically what you have are the 5 functions on high. That's the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover, IPITR, if you want to use a silly acronym. Then there is 22 categories underneath of that, hierarchically arranged underneath of that, and 98 subcategories. So the idea here, one of the things we were trying to create was something that covered the entire breadth of not only IT considerations, but also operational technology, where cyber touches physical is a way to think of that space, and also privacy considerations where cyber touches personal is a way to think of that. So we were trying to quite purposely to create something that would encompass cybersecurity outcomes across the entire breadth of that landscape. By the way, side note, right now we're talking about whether or not it's appropriate timing for an update for cybersecurity framework. If you have observations about the breadth of framework, given the measuring stick I just depicted, please share those observations with us, because it would be a good time, I think, to get those in. So you can see here, hopefully, also some once again, we were headed for commonly used terms. So you're hopefully seeing some terms that look familiar. Asset management, a lot of what Celia was talking about earlier, getting your arms around your information, getting your arms around your information systems. That's classical asset management sort of topics, right? Business environment, governance, risk assessment. These are categories. These are just a few of the 22 categories of cybersecurity framework. A little bit of a shorthand off there on the side, that ID.am equals shorthand for asset management. And some of these categories, I would say to you, when you're getting started with framework, are indeed more important than others. So I want to just highlight a couple that are really important. A little bit difficult to see, but what I've got here is the business environment category, the governance category, and the risk management strategy category. And I suggest to you that you start here. Business environment, it's about getting those objectives, not just in your head, but if you're a smaller organization, especially you're 10, you're 20, you're 30 people, somewhere in there you're crossing a threshold where you need to get, as we've heard consistently now, we need to get that stuff written down, the business objectives and also the priorities of the business, captured, communicated. Risk management strategy. What are you gonna do about the risks? This is gets into your classical, the 4 things you can do with risk: mitigate, eliminate, transfer, and accept. Right? What are you gonna do with a risk, and what are the if-thens around that? The governance. Once again, the horizontal integration of cybersecurity, risk management into larger risk considerations. I suggest to you start here if you're a small business or if you're just getting started with Framework or you're a brand new organization. These are good places to start. And if you're a smaller organization, these don't have to take these don't have to be 50-page documents each. I'm talking about, how about getting a paragraph down on paper? How about getting maybe a page each on paper? Okay. Once you start to get that hierarchy in the org, it's critically important to get it written down and communicated to the people who need to know. It's also just critically important to say, I'm in charge of this org and cybersecurity is important to us, even though that's not what we do. That's really important to say. So tomorrow, we're going to get into something that we call a profile. In fact, I think that's the 8 a.m. presentation. And once again, a profile is a customization of the cybersecurity framework core for you. The customization is a fusion of business and mission logic with cybersecurity outcomes, specifically transposing those business objectives into some sort of cyber priority, and you get your business objectives, not only your business objectives, but your cybersecurity requirements, be it from legislation, regulation, etc. They all have a bearing on the priority. So prioritization is a big fixture. It's a big feature of what a cybersecurity framework profile is, and we'll be talking about that more. And right here is where the framework profile fits in the grand scheme of things. Some of the resources that are available to you, we're going to be highlighting those on a panel tomorrow. And these are some of your classical NIST resources at Computer Security Division, the Computer Security Resource Center.nist.gov or csrc.nist.gov. That's where you're going to see a lot of your special publications, your NIST interagency reports, and other types of documents. www.nist.gov/cybersecurity framework. It's another great place to go for resources because we have out there nearly 50 question, frequently asked question document, and we also have a catalog of resources that are available for you. Earlier we were talking about the CISRIC Working Group 4 report, and the profiles that were created by CISRIC for telecommunications are out there in that publication. That publication is one of 40-some resources that are available for you at www.nist.gov/cybersecurity framework. And with that, I think I am done my presentation, so appreciate your time.